He who is content with what he has is richer than he who has everything. This is such a great 4 verses. Let's take a look at them. I want to read them and make a few comments, and then we'll share the bread and the cup together. But I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now that at last your care for me has flourished again. Though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. And then this great verse that we love to quote, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished. Remember, this whole section on contentment, Paul's not writing from a mountaintop retreat where he's kicking back. No, he's in jail. He's in prison. This is a prison epistle. And it has more emphasis because of that. That now at last your care for me has flourished again. Though you surely did care, but you lacked the opportunity. On the graph, verse 10, the meaning is gratitude for continued support. Gratitude to the Lord, even when expressed to the Philippians. So Paul doesn't start out by saying, hey, thank you guys, you really did good. No, he says, verse 10, but I rejoiced in the Lord. Paul's focus on every provision, everything in his life, Jesus was his source. Personal meaning, delayed help does not mean forgotten love, timing without bitterness. I think it's important in this case to just draw one quick little illustration from it, and that is that at the time that Paul needed it, they couldn't provide it, and then they did. Timing. Verse 11, not that I speak in regards to need. I love it. This is a great passage. For I have learned. Notice in verse 12, he has the same line, I have learned. There is an important thing going on in this passage. If you look at the asterisk at the bottom of the page, I have it there, I have learned, verses 11 and 12. This is process-oriented learning. Learning and growing through experience. In other words, this is not classroom, this is not a Bible study kind of learning. It's not classroom learning. It's on the job training. It's not instant where you learn how to do something and you instantly know how to do it. No, this is a process. It takes a period of time. That's the context for what he means in verse 11. I have learned in whatever state, whether Vermont or Florida or I am to be content. I love it. Verse 11 on the graph, contentment is dependence on God, not circumstances, formation through experience. Live faithfully when in need. It is a process of learning how to be content. Now, it's important to understand that contentment, Paul uses a Greek word for the word content in this passage. It's a word that was common usage in those days. As a matter of fact, the Stoics use the very same word. If you're familiar with Stoic philosophy, which I really enjoy reading Seneca and some of these guys that are Stoics, Basically, you can summarize Stoicism this way. You can only change the things you can change. You can't change things you can't change. That's a summary of what Stoicism is. The Stoic understands there are certain things that they can change and can't change. But they get into trouble with this particular word of contentment because the Stoic, first of all, the word contentment here in the Greek means to be self-sufficient. Self-sufficient. Some Bible translations even translate it that way. The problem is that if you borrow the term from a Stoic meaning, you come away with thinking that I don't need anyone. I've mastered my emotions. I've figured it all out. I'm independent of all help. In other words, the world can just fall apart and I'm going to be content. That's not the way that Paul uses the word contentment. He puts a different meaning on it in this passage. And we get an insight into this starting in verse 11 and 12. Verse 12 says, I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere in all things. I've learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. Now, I don't think that means that when Paul was hungry and destitute that he was necessarily crying about it or complaining about it. I don't think when things went really well, I don't think he was excited and joyful necessarily. Why? Because he wasn't depressed when things went bad, for the most part, and he wasn't overjoyed when things went really well. So Paul puts a different twist on contentment, and he says, I am not controlled by circumstances. My stability does not come from supply or lack. That's so important. My sufficiency, remember the word means self-sufficient. In the classical Greek definition, Stoic meaning, the word contentment means self-sufficiency. Paul puts a different twist on this and says, my sufficiency is rooted outside of myself. Not inside, but outside of myself. I have learned. Verse 12, living in life extremes. The theological meaning, spiritual danger exists on both ends of the spectrum. Personal meaning, not every season is chosen, but every season can be learned from. It's really difficult that I don't get to pick what my day is going to be like. I wake up in the morning, I'm praying for a great day. How many have prayed for a great day and it just went downhill from that point on? Sometimes it just happens that way. I don't get to choose the day. I get to choose how I react to it. Again, that's a basic Stoic meaning. I don't get to choose the day, but I get to choose how I react to it. Paul would add to that, the way I react to it is by getting my strength, not from my resolve, but from what I have learned in walking with Jesus Christ in my life from day to day. I love verse 12. Look at the extremes. Abased and abound. Now he flips those around in the rest of the verse. Full and hungry, both to abound and suffer need. Why does he switch those around? Paul does everything for effect. The opening phrase, I know how to go through tough things and I know how to really enjoy things. Then he goes on to say, everywhere in all things I've learned both to be full. Doesn't say, he starts in the positive when he has learned it. Verse 12 starts with, I know how. Follow me on this. I think it's important. I know how, but then I've learned. Think about it for a moment. How many things do you know, but you've not learned yet? There are so many things that I know, but I've not really learned them yet. In personal relationships, in finances, in so many things, I can know all of the right things to do, but if I don't do them, I've not learned them. I may know them, but that's different than learning them. It's a key part of this passage and Paul's, I think, what he's trying to teach us about contentment. And then the last verse, the one we love to quote, the one I like to fall back on, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Excluding jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. I mean, I can think of so many things that I can't do. So many times people misuse this kind of a verse. I can do all things. Well, does all mean all in all situations? I don't know. If you're from Texas, it does, but that's the kind of all that comes up out of the ground. Right? Some of you get that, and the rest of you don't. So let's look at this verse a little bit deeper. A couple of things. I have two asterisks at the bottom. Strengthen in verse 13. It's the Greek word, and I have it translated out, umano. Buried in it is the Greek word dunamis. Many of us know the power or the word dunamos. You will receive power, dunamos, when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. This is a power word. So, on the two asterisks, it is Christ who empowers us to do all things. My real strength is his strength in me. Now, I don't think that God necessarily makes it so suddenly I can press 300 pounds. Gives me that physical strength to do something. Yet he will strengthen me to get through things. If he calls me into it, he will give me the strength to get through it. I had a dear pastor many years ago. I was going through a certain circumstance in my life, and I kept running up against a wall with it. And I remember specifically using this passage. I can do all things through Christ. And then he pulled me aside and said, there's only one problem with that, Mike. And I said, what's that? He said, God didn't call you to do this. He's not going to give you strength to do something that he didn't call you to do. So one way to understand that maybe you're not in God's will is if you keep pushing against something and you don't get the strength to get through it, and you're trusting in God to do that, and the harder you push, the tougher it is. And you ask God for the strength and it doesn't seem to be there. It may be that God is closing that door and saying, that's not a direction that I have for you. You'll never get contentment doing that. Contentment is going through the struggle and knowing that God is strengthening you through it. That's real contentment. At least from a biblical perspective. So on your handout, the meaning is the principle of enduring strength. Theological meaning, Christ supplies ongoing strength, not automatic success. Again, all four of these verses are put in a continual, growing, learning process orientation. It's not instant gratification. You cannot become instantly mature. Think about that for a moment. You cannot become instantly mature. When do you mature? Well, we're still figuring that out, aren't we? Yeah. Is it at 60, 40, 30, 80, 90? When do you become fully mature? I believe this passage gives us a little bit of an indication. I can become mature in some areas and still be not mature in other areas. That's because I know something in my head, but I've not learned it to make it be a part of my life. I think maturity is when I've taken what I know and I've learned it and applied it in my life. There's great contentment in that. Even if everything falls apart, I can be content because I've learned to be mature through the process of the learning, not just the head knowledge knowing, but the process of the learning. I think most of us in this room, because of our age group and where we're at, there's many things that we can say, I've matured in that area of my life. There may be some other areas, though, we haven't quite matured in yet. We may be resisting God. We may be kicking against Him as He's trying to teach us something. I find great freedom in this passage because I don't know about you, but I need God's strength. I will not be fully mature in every area of my life until I see Him face to face. But I love verse 13 because it starts out, I can do, but it ends with, I can't do it alone. Do you see that flow? Look at it. Paul says, I can do, but Paul's the first one to admit and teach through all of his teaching, he can't do it alone. I can do as long as Christ strengthens me. That's where my contentment really lies. And I pray that you have His contentment this morning.